Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to address the issue of the cross-border illicit trade and on the international tracing instrument. Since the 2008 Biennial Meeting of States on the UNPOA, IANSA members have made numerous constructive contributions to preventing and combating the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons across borders. For example, West African Network members have been successful in mobilizing support and ratification of the ECOWAS Small Arms and Light Weapons Convention, which has now become legally binding. Southern African members have collaborated with the Southern African Regional Police Chiefs Cooperation Organization to design and implement standard operating procedures for the SADC Firearms Control Protocol, as well as develop firearms training material for Southern African police. In Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Sub-Saharan Africa, our members have helped governments to develop small arms and light weapons national action plans, as well as revise national small arms control policies and legislation. In the Pacific region and elsewhere, IANSA members have worked closely with states to enhance stockpile security measures in order to prevent diversion. In Colombia, Guatemala, and elsewhere, IANSA members have assisted states in research, monitoring, and analysis of the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons. Our members have collaborated with the Economic Community of Central African States and the United Nations Regional Center for Peace and Disarmament in Togo to develop a draft legal instrument on the control of small arms, light weapons, and ammunition in Central Africa. Furthermore, our members have provided technical advice on arms brokering and its regulation to African government representatives. IANSA commends the efforts by a number of states and intergovernmental organizations to improve border control through collaborative mechanisms, capacity building, and resource mobilization. For example, IANSA appreciates the G8's reaffirmed commitment to combat illicit manufacturing and trafficking of firearms and to accelerate this commitment at the upcoming G8 Leaders Summit in Canada. However, we note with concern that the transfer of illicit small arms and light weapons continues relatively unhindered in violence-prone regions. IANSA consequently calls on states in these regions to enact legislation to enhance border control mechanisms, augment interstate collaborative processes, as well as marshal the necessary resources. Therefore, we request donor states to assist under-resourced states in this regard. IANSA remains alarmed about the continued infringements of United Nations Security Council arms embargoes by certain states and non-state groups. We call on all states to actively comply with all UN arms embargoes. IANSA acknowledges the increased momentum in global and regional discussions to strengthen the regulation of arms brokering. Yet it remains apparent that brokers engaging in illicit weapons trafficking can continue to operate with impunity in a number of regions. We therefore call on all states, where required, to enact and implement national legislation to effectively regulate arms brokering. On the issue of the International Tracing Instrument, or the ITI, IANSA emphasizes the importance of effectively tracing illicit small arms and light weapons as a means to prevent, combat, and eradicate the illicit trade. Hence, we are supportive of the ITI. IANSA commends those states that have submitted reports on their implementation of the ITI to the UN, but urges more states to report on their implementation efforts every 2 years, as required by the ITI. We recognize the progress that some states have made on the implementation of the ITI to date. In particular, we applaud the acquisition of firearm marking equipment by REXA in East Africa and also by the Southern African Regional Police Chiefs Cooperation Organization for their various member states. However, we are concerned about the slow pace of implementation of the ITI and therefore urge states to accelerate their efforts in this regard, especially towards ensuring that the ITI becomes legally binding. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, IANSA calls on states as a matter of priority to enact marking, record-keeping and tracing legislation if absent or ineffective, mark all small arms and light weapons held by states and civilians, maintain accurate and up-to-date records of all small arms and light weapons holdings, and finally, to improve communication and information sharing between states on small arms and light weapons tracing, which includes appointing a dedicated point of contact on tracing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.